I am so honored to be here and so honored that anyone would come to this. It's fun to look out and see all these faces. I had a lot of stress when they opened up the back areas, and people are sitting there, so I appreciate that. It's a little embarrassing always. I joke with my kids sometimes. It's hard to make eye contact with someone you know when they're speaking. You're just like a little embarrassed for them. And I feel that sort of secondhand embarrassment for myself where I'm like, you guys know me. I'm up here pretending to be someone who knows what they're talking about. My family knows what I'm really like. My friends know what I'm really like. But thank you for showing up anyway, even though you know what I'm really like. They gave me this beautiful corsage, and I've already thrown one flower off from gesturing, so I'm going to gently put it here, but I do appreciate it. I felt like I might get in trouble if I took it off. I really am so honored to be here, and this is even more special because before I knew about this, things just kind of happened, and I am teaching adjunct at BYU this semester, and it has been an absolute delight. So I have a few students in here, and they don't get any extra credit for coming, so we should just be very grateful that they showed up because now they know how I teach. But it has been a delight to be back in the classroom. It's been a minute. And it's been a minute since I've been at BYU campus, and there's been a lot of water under the bridge, a lot of different things have happened, and it's felt, frankly, and I don't use this word lightly, kind of sacred to have the chance to be here, to rewrite some things, I'm bad at writing, but good at revision, I always say, and so I feel like I'm having a chance to do a little bit of that here too, make some experiences my own again, and get to see some people I truly, truly love. So this is a lecture called Created to Create Your Divine Birthright. They asked for this about 6 months ago, and you think, what a great idea, I love my topic. And then you start writing it out and you think, I don't know anything about this topic. But the good news is that happens with every topic that I've ever picked, and so I know now that you just sort of carry on and things start to gather around it. But there's a really beautiful, I went to a movie, and now, because I'm standing in front of you, I can't remember the name of the new space telescope, it is not the Hubble. But I went to an IMAX movie, and I'm at that point in life where I've lived long enough that everything makes me weep. And so I just sat there and cried through the whole thing about all these scientists who dedicated their whole lives decades of their lives to building this so we could see these images, and then not everyone saw it come to fruition, and there were millions of little steps that had to work for this telescope to go into the sky to unfold just perfectly. And it happened, and now we have these images. And I love this quote, I've loved it for years. I remember it pinging in my heart when I first heard it, and it's by Elder Uchtdorf. And he says that the desire to create is one of the deepest yearnings of the human soul. And I feel that. I have felt that since I was a little kid. And I think most of us feel that. My brother, who's not here because he has a job, and is a wonderful, very fun, very funny human being, always says that he remembers it's a dark day as a kid when you realize, oh, I'm not going to go pro maybe in any sport. Because before then you kind of feel like, I might go pro and it could be baseball. I'm good at everything. And I think as kids we kind of have that feeling. And I loved him saying that because that feels true. There's a moment where we realize, oh, maybe this is harder than I thought, but we're born with it. We're born with thinking we can make stuff and that we're probably going to be pretty good at it. And Elder Uchtdorf also said, no matter our talents, education, background, or abilities, we each have an inherent wish to create something that did not exist before. And I feel like we're all doing this all the time. We are born to create. It can be small things, it can be large things, it can be 5 things, it can be 20 things. We all love different stuff, and we're all here to make things. So I found this awesome Instagram account that maybe a lot of you have seen. It's where a dad who is very good at Photoshop takes his little kids' drawings and makes them real and does photo renderings of them. And I think this is so fun because as kids we draw creative things, we make awesome stuff. We're not that scared that our horse is going to be bad or maybe have all its legs on one side. And we go ahead and make them. And so there's a few of these that I just think illustrate the joy of that so much. This anteater, porcupine guy, raccoon with his head on the ground and all his little legs again on one side. There's a great cheetah tiger. I love this hummingbird so much with his little kicky legs. I don't know how this guy stays afloat, but how do regular whales stay afloat? I don't know. So I think these These are very fun because there's that creativity, that energy. And then now I'm going to present to you the best poem ever written. All of the rest of us creative writers can go home and quit. This is by a little boy who's age 6. It's called The Tiger. The tiger, he destroyed his cage. Yes, yes, the tiger is out. And I love the energy behind that too. In so few words, everything happens. And my daughter, I hope this is okay, Lainey, I probably should have asked you if I could show the slide. But this was a kindergarten outfit that my daughter came up with when she was about 5. And she's got 2 skirts on, you can't tell. She has a notepad to take your orders. She has a fireplace, like gas fireplace turner on her, I always forget, remote. That's her cell phone, a pair of gloves, 2 hats, and her Doc McStuffins stethoscope. And it's a great outfit, and we should all dress a little bit more like that. So this is a really fun age. All of these things are awesome, and then the world gets to us a little bit, and we kind of lose that energy. We think someone might make fun of our outfit. We wonder if we're a very good artist after all. We think maybe the stuff I write isn't interesting or good or exciting, and so it takes that away, and I want us to feel that again. That's my biggest joy in life, is creating, and it's also the part that breaks your heart a little bit. These are the things that I have made. This is the part where I give you my sort of my CV and say, I'm talking to you because I did this. And I wrote some books. These are the ones that, if anyone's heard of me, they're usually the ones that are in the Match series. I've written 4 others. I've written a couple of picture books. My most recent young adult novel is called The Only Girl in Town. And then I just wrote my first adult novel, which is called The Unwedding. And it's a murder mystery for grown-ups. I say that because anyone can read it, but people tend to think adult means something else when I say it. So if I say grown-ups, it's a little more clear. And Reese Witherspoon chose it for her book club, which was very fun and exciting. And so these are the things that I've made. And then these are my 4 favorite things that I've made, which are my children, my family. And this is us hiking in the San Juans about a year ago. So as we go through this presentation, what I want you to think about is, what do you most want to create? What is it in your life that if you die, you'll feel like, but I wanted to make that thing the most? What is that? So I've learned a few things about creating. I've been creating for a while now, in the sense that I've been published. I've been creating with pay, I guess, since 2006. And before that, I was creating different ways. I was a teacher at Timpview and Provo High and again in New York. And I feel like the lesson plans I created were just as important maybe than some of the writing that I've done. So think about those things. What are the things that you're dying to make? And then these are some things I've learned about creating in my time as sometimes a somewhat paid professional, as other teachers know. Creating is springs and wells. I've learned it's sometimes you having something that's bubbling up and you doing it, and sometimes it's a well, a reservoir that you're drawing on that someone else has created. And so you want to discover them. Near my house, there is a hike in Rock Canyon that has 2 fountains on the way. And I have a very good friend, Andy Ellis, to thank for introducing me to that hike and to those fountains. And I feel like they are a little bit sacred. And they're this fresh, really cool, clear water that bubbles up, and it's beautiful. Every time I go there, I feel filled. I'm from Southern Utah, so I have to really discern between fill and fill, because I say the same people at times. And so that's a place, that's a way, is nature. I've also found that creating is looking to what others have made. Find inspiration there and let them scaffold you. My students who are in here know that I use that word a lot, scaffolding. Like, creating can feel really intimidating, so if you have a tiny framework around you, anything at all that you can sort of step on, or a ladder, or I'm making this thing and I do have some bones, I do have some structure for it. That feels really, really good sometimes. So when I wrote The Only Girl in Town, and I'm going to use this as an example, it was a book that was weird, well, it remains weird actually, even upon publication, because it's about a girl the rest of her town disappears and she's the only person left. And she doesn't know what happened, she doesn't know where everyone went, and she's trying to figure that out. And I got the idea, I realized, probably 20 years earlier when I was teaching a short story called There Will Come Soft Rains at Timpview High. I was glancing over at Timpview College. a piece intimately when you teach it 6 times a day to 9th graders or 10th graders or whatever. You start to think, over a course of years, which I didn't so much do, I only taught a couple of years there in Provo School District, and there's that short story, There Will Come Soft Rains. I was excited to teach it every time. I never got sick of it, and that I thought, this is such beautiful, good writing. And it's a creepy little story, but a beautiful little story. It's about the nuclear holocaust, and it has no characters. So in my book, there's no characters except this one girl, and then I do give her a cat. Because she was too lonely, I felt bad for her. And in There Will Come Soft Rains, there truly are no characters. There's just a mechanical house, and the nuclear holocaust has happened, and the mechanical house just goes on cleaning and cleaning and cleaning itself. And I have been haunted by that story ever since. And so as I was writing this book, I thought, what is the field? What am I doing? This is a common question when I'm writing a book. What am I doing? I'm not sure how I got this idea. I don't know how to see it through, and I thought, I think it's a little bit like There Will Come Soft Rains. I think that's the feel I want, where you care about the characters, even though most of them are no longer here. And so there's this line in the book, the entire west face of the house was black, save for 5 places. And that's what those people were doing in the moment, like the bomb went off and everything was obliterated. And you feel the presence of those people in the story, and I thought, I want to do that. Like, I want to feel that way in this story. And I don't know if I succeeded, but that was my goal. And then I find it really fun, and this is why I'm using this example as drawing on others for scaffolding. Ray Bradbury's short story, There Will Come Soft Rains, that's in the Martian Chronicles, takes its title from a poem that was written quite a bit earlier called There Will Come Soft Rains by Sarah Teasdale. And I'll read it to you because you'll see, since I've given you the summary of the story of my book, where the connection is. There will come soft rains in the smell of the ground, and swallows circling with their shivering sound, and frogs in the pools singing at night, and wild plum trees in tremulous white. Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire, and not one will know of the war, not one will care at last when it is done. Not one would mind, neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly. And spring herself, when she woke at dawn, would scarcely know that we were gone. And so you can pretty clearly see the inspiration that Bradbury got for his piece from this poem. So we're all building things all the time. We're all getting inspiration from someone else. I also have found that creating is hope. And I'm going to read you an Emily Dickinson poem that's quite famous called Hope is the Thing with Feathers. And I went in to find a picture of a bird with feathers, and I felt like this is pretty sick. Like this bird is just like coming for you with his wings and his beady little gaze. I'm a little concerned about it, but I feel like it does sort of give the image of illumination, descent, lift, all of these awesome things. And her poem is so beautiful. It's hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chilliest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. And I love that poem. I've loved it since I was a kid, but with respect to Emily, I would like to take a little issue with that. I actually think hope asks quite a lot of us. I think hope is something that is scary to have. There have been times when hope has been something I've chosen not to have because it was too painful. And there have been times when it felt like the only answer, like living without it would be pain instead. I like to avoid pain, in case you can't tell. And so that is one of the things that I've thought about a lot as creating is it's hopeful to create. It feels hopeful to write something, but also creating is work. The hope does not work without the work. This is a blue morpho butterfly. They are beautiful. I first learned about them from Dora and Diego and their seminal series, Dora the Explorer, and then I forget what Diego's series was called. He wasn't as successful. No shade to Diego. But there is this moment, and Anne Patchett writes really beautifully about this, where like we want to make stuff and we want it to be beautiful, and it's in our mind floating around, and she refers to it as a butterfly. She's a beautiful writer. So we have all these ideas, and they're like these butterflies. They're gorgeous. They're flying around. They're beautiful. And they can remain that way in our head forever. They never become anything more than what they are, and that's fine. They can stay beautiful there, but if you're going to make something, there is this moment that's pretty painful that she describes. When I can't think of another stall, like when she can't put it off anymore, when putting it off has actually become more painful than doing it, I reach up and pluck the butterfly, or the idea, from the air. I take it from the region of my head and I press it down against my desk, and there, with my own hand, I kill it. And there's a great W. Somerset Maugham quote that I used the other day in class, a class that I was teaching, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but he says, there are 3 ways to write a novel. Unfortunately, no one knows what they are. And that is what creating feels like a lot of the time. It's just, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm killing it. And that is how it feels. But the pain of not making the thing, the pain of not putting it down, not getting it out of your own brain, giving it to someone else. Sometimes they hate it. Sometimes they don't think it's interesting. I've definitely had some bad reviews. But that pain of not being able to do that becomes more than the pain of turning it into this, which is still beautiful. It will never be as beautiful as it was in your mind, your creation, or maybe it will. Maybe it will happen for you. That has not yet happened for me, but it is something observable. It is something shareable. It is something that you can put on a board, show to other people, and kind of add to the rest of everybody else's butterflies that they've pinned down. It's a way of being part of the conversation that doesn't happen if you don't take it out of your own head. So I've said the sad stuff about creating, and there are a lot of moments. Someone said, I've had a few requests, can I shadow you? I want to be an author. Can I watch you at work? And I'm like, well, work looks like this. Like me not knowing what to write next. Or work can look like me lying on the floor, starfishing is what I call it, where my arms and legs are out and I'm staring at the ceiling and I don't know what to write. The problem with writing too is you're like, who made this mess? All right, it's me. But creating is also joy. It's some of the biggest, best joy you can have. There are moments of flow when things are just moving along, and Stephen King has a great quote that I will not give you in its entirety because it's BYU, where he says, sometimes he's writing and he goes back to look what he's writing and he's like, I'm effing Shakespeare. Like, I just am. This is so, so good. And then sometimes he comes back and looks at his writing and he's like, no, I'm actually just effed. Like, that's so bad. So there is that feeling of excitement around it. And there's nothing better to me than getting an idea. I love it. I love that feeling. And Ray Bradbury, who I adore, you'll be able to tell that throughout this presentation, he talks a lot about creating in a very joyful way. If you're a writer and you haven't read his book about writing, which is called Zen in the Art of Writing, that's a happy book about creating. There are a lot of ones that are not as happy, but then Ray Bradbury also wrote a short story that I love, where he talks about an author who left his profession and is the happiest person on the planet. Like, they keep trying to go find him. A reporter comes and he's like, I'm gonna get the real story. He must hate his life. He abandoned his passion. And he's so sad, the reporter is, because the author of the story is just living his best life without having to create. And so there are 2 sides to this all the time, but the joyful side is definitely there. And Bradbury talks about his people, like the authors he looks to for inspiration and excitement, and he says, they all knew the joy of creating in large or small forms, on unlimited or restricted canvases. These are the children of the gods. And I think that's a little gift we've been given as people of the LDS faith, of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if most of us are in here, and I think everyone actually has it, where we're given this thought of, this is what you're supposed to do. Like, your job is to make stuff. And if you're lucky in eternity, guess what you get to do? Keep on making stuff. And this time it'll be perfect. And so I love that about this quote. I've been thinking about some of the things that I love to make. So I'm not a great cook, but I know how to make freezer jam, so I hope you're impressed. And I made some freezer jam, and I just thought it was so pretty, and I put it in these little jars, and then I had gotten some water from that spring and put it in these jars, and I just felt really happy, and I wanted to take a picture of it. I get this from my mom. She likes to take pictures of things. That's how we kind of save the moment. So I took a little picture of that. So as we're going through this, again, I want you guys to keep thinking about what you like to make. And then I thought about this beautiful, beautiful thing which is an arrangement that my neighbor, Danielle Gibbs, made from flowers in January. She went out and foraged and made this bouquet for a friend of mine that I said, Danielle, can you put together a bouquet? And she said, yeah, I bet I could forage. And I thought, that did not even occur to me. I was just kind of thinking maybe you'd go to Trader Joe's and put this together. I was offering to pay her. This sounds like I'm the worst neighbor ever. And she went out into the winter garden and made this. And so that's something I think about all the time when I'm making stuff is Danielle and her flowers. Creating is surprise. And that's another favorite part I have, is when a character walks into a scene and I did not think about that character until the moment they showed up on the page. Or when something happens in the book and I think, you guys are doing this, all right. And I know that makes me sound a little crazy, but if you're an author, you might understand. And he talks, again, this is Bradbury talking about those people. They knew fun in their work. No matter if creation came hard here and there along the way, or what illnesses and tragedies touched their most private lives. They were surprised. They had joy and fun in it. Again, I'm referring to this hike I go on all the time, but I went in the spring of 2023 when we'd had that huge winter, and I was just hiking up the canyon and I thought, what is that? And it looked like a dandelion. I stood there forever trying to get a picture, but it was almost like a globe of perfect water. And then it looked like a water tree, and I did that thing where you sort of plunge through the wilderness trying to figure out what something is. And it was just the water pressure valve that they have in the canyon, that they divert the water and we get to drink it in our faucets in Provo. And in certain parts of Provo, I won't say where, so you don't feel sad if you don't have it. But I realized, oh, it's just the water pressure valve, but it was so absolutely magical. I was completely surprised by it. And then another day in the canyon, I was coming out and someone had made art with leaves and cairns and rocks. So there was this cairn that had been encircled by different colors of leaves, and then they'd also done flowers out of the leaves with stick stems. I didn't get quite a good enough picture, but you can see what it is. And I was so delighted by this, I just stopped and couldn't believe how magical it was. Someone had taken the time to create this. And then later I found out from my friend it was it their activity days? Yeah, it was her son's activity days group. They'd just taken him up the mountain to make things, and then everyone who walked past got to delight in this. So I feel like being surprised is such an important part of creativity. Did I go home and write a story about this? No. Did that spark something in me and make me want to make stuff? Yeah. So it's not always the same thing. Another big question I think is, who and what do you love? And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but I think that's probably the most important question. I do think creating is in small details. Like Whitman said, I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars. And when I read an author I really love, like Bradbury or Ann Patchett or Ann Tyler or Jackie Woodson, they have paid attention to the details. The blades of grass are so beautiful that when you look up to the stars, it's exquisite either way. And when he does this, he does ask us to look a little closer, Whitman does. But I also think creating is big questions. We're answering big questions with little details sometimes, I think. And so some of the questions I ask myself as I'm writing are, where are you home? Or I ask that of my characters, can you still go there? If it's a yes or if it's a no, what does that mean? And then this is a little cottage I thought illustrated that point. Sometimes it feels welcoming, sometimes it's any port in a storm, sometimes it feels or looks like the same place, the same picture. Oh, there's nothing here for me. I should keep going. And then another question I ask my characters and myself is, how have you been hurt? And how have you hurt? Because unfortunately, most of us don't get through life without causing pain in others, in addition to feeling it ourselves. Creating is also tipping over, and that means like you tipping over and falling down, or it means you tipping over your cup to fill that of someone else's. Both of those things are true. So I'm back to this question of who and what do you love, and how have they broken you, and how have you reassembled yourself? Because even the people you love the most are going to break you, and even if they didn't mean to, it'll happen. I have a really sweet son who I will speak about slightly, who is on the autism spectrum, and sometimes he breaks my heart because of the beauty of with what he says. So, and also the questions he asks. So one day there's a beautiful reservoir called Tibble Fork Reservoir, and I put this in my book, The Unwedding. He asked me to take him to the lake, is what he calls it. So we drove up to the lake, and I noticed he had his Harry Potter wand. He was probably about 16 at the time, and his dad and I were going through a divorce, and things were really tricky for all of us. But I didn't think anything of it because he kind of liked his Harry Potter wand. He kind of uses it as a fidget. And then we got to the lake, and he walked straight out on the dock, and I followed him to make sure he was okay. And he turned around and handed me the wand and said, "Mom, turn me into a fish." And he likes the movie Finding Nemo. I'm not sure if that's where it came from. I also think it could be that old Sword in the Stone movie where they turn him into a fish. But he was 100% convinced that he had brought everything to the point where I would be able to do that. And it still breaks my heart to think about, because I have to say, I can't turn you into a fish. I can't fix this for you. I can't give us different forms. Sorry, I didn't think I'd cry this much. And there was literally nothing I could do. He was weeping, I was weeping. He hasn't looked at the wand since. I felt like I failed him that day. And I kind of did. I didn't give him the thing that he wanted, but we reassemble. We put ourselves back together. We say, "I'm sorry that I couldn't do that for you, but this is what I can." So again, back to that question of who and what you love. And back to this tipping quote by Ray Bradbury: "We are cups, constantly and quietly being filled. The trick is knowing how to tip ourselves over and let the beautiful stuff out." And I think that is absolutely what we're doing as creatives. And so many times I have been filled by what other people have done, when you're just sitting there with this little empty cup and somebody walks by, and there it is. There it is for you to have. Creating is using the blocks. So there's a really great quote that Emily Bell Freeman says that I think is actually a quote from someone else. And it's about how someone's little kid came over and knocked over the blocks of another child, and they were so upset because the thing they built is now broken. And she said, "But you realize going through life, sometimes you feel like that, like you've been knocked over, your blocks are a mess, someone ruined the thing that you made or the life you thought you had, but you get to keep all the blocks, like all the pieces that you earned and learned and thought about, you have those still. And so you get to make something else again." There have been a lot of times in my life where I've had to remind myself of this, where I'm like, okay, this is the hardest time. When I was writing my first book, we were living in Ithaca, New York. My ex was going to Cornell, and we were the house parents in a sorority, and I had quit teaching to take care of my cute kids and the sorority girls, and I was like, I'm gonna write a book. And I remember feeling pretty pumped about myself, like, if I can write a book now, this is the hardest it will ever be. And I thought, I have tiny kids, we have no money, I have a spouse who's gone a lot, and I'm carving this time out in these weird circumstances. I'm getting interrupted constantly by girls in the sorority or my own children who need things, and that's fine, those were my jobs. But I thought, it is gonna be cake after this. And spoiler alert, it was not cake. And it's not cake for anyone ever, I've realized. Like, I look at the people who are actual doctors, who are saving lives. They have personal lives. Like, everyone is doing a lot all the time. But you get to keep the blocks. So looking at all of us who are creatives, we have certainly failed. I have failed personally, I have failed professionally. It happens pretty much constantly. I taught a class yesterday, sorry students, that I went home and thought, I wish I'd done this, 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 and this. And it would have been so much better. And I think so, this is the part where I talk about sports, because although I am bad at sports, I've been watching them all my life, and they have been filling my cup all my life. So remember Simone Biles in 2020? 2021 actually was the 2020 Olympics, but they'd gotten postponed. She had trained for 4 years. She had testified to Congress about Larry Nassar, the gymnastics coach who had sexually abused hundreds of young girls, as the IOC doctor, the US Olympic Committee doctor. And she got to the Olympics. She's trained forever. She's been through this insane amount of personal hell. and she gets the twisties, which are a thing that gymnasts get, I learned in 2021, where they can no longer gauge, it's real, where their body is in the air. And in golf, it's called the yips when their swing is off. And it happens to athletes in every sport, but for gymnasts, it's particularly dangerous when your thing is off, your expertise area is gone, because you could die. And so she was vaulting in practice, and she was like, I can't do it. I don't have it. I don't know where I am in the air. All my life, I've known, and now I don't. So she quit. She said, I'm not going to perform in gymnastics competitions anymore. And the media was horrible to her. They came at her, especially the conservative pundits like Piers Morgan. They were like, oh, so we just quit now. We can just quit the Olympics. This is fine. This is something that's okay for people to do. And there's a great, I actually use it in my class when I'm teaching hermit crab essay. There's a great flow chart someone on McSweeney's did where it's like, are you allowed to judge Simone Biles? And then it takes you through if you actually are. And at the end, only Simone Biles is allowed to judge Simone Biles. But she was part of this greater conversation about mental health, and she said, it's not okay for me to do this. Like, I'm taking a step back. So even with all this around her, people saying she failed, she was on the floor talking to her teammates after every routine. She didn't go home. She didn't go to her room and cry. She engaged with her team this way. And so we have all certainly failed, even Simone Biles, the GOAT, but you have also certainly flown. This is probably going to make me cry too. Now that I'm a parent, it's all disaster all the time with the tears. But this is her before the Olympics this year. This is her when she decided to make her comeback about September of last year. And she is doing a vault that no one else in the world can do. And someone captured this shot. And she is absolutely alone, it feels like, but there's those glimmers in the darkness. And we all now know what happened. She came back, had an absolutely successful run at the Olympics on her own terms. What would already not exist without you is something you should think about too. It's easy to always look to the next thing, but you've already all made stuff. Everyone in this room has. What are some of those things? How can you revisit them? How can you feel proud of yourself for what you did, even if they didn't turn out perfect? Creating is lonely. I'm so sorry to tell you that. But there's a lot of work that you're going to do by yourself, and you're going to feel pretty far away from where you want to be. But I think that Heavenly Father made us lonely on purpose. And why would he do that? It isn't just us. It's not just you that's lonely. It's not just me that's lonely. My dad once said, Dad, you didn't know I was going to say this, but you said, I think about Moroni sometimes. He must have been so lonely. The rest of the world is gone, and he's writing this book at the end of the world for people he doesn't know. Why? So why would Heavenly Father make us lonely so often? And Elder Holland said, he is called the Savior's Atonement, the loneliest journey ever made. And I think that's why. I think that's, we can understand the atonement better through our loneliness. And I think that it brings us closer, ultimately, which is what Heavenly Father wants for us, to each other. Creating is community. And Ross Gay, who visited campus last year and who I've loved for several years, talks about this. He says, the point is that in almost every instance of our lives, our social lives, we are, if we pay attention, in the midst of an almost constant, if subtle, caretaking. Holding open doors, offering elbows at crosswalks, letting someone else go first, helping with the heavy bags. Reaching what's too high or what's been dropped, pulling someone back to their feet. Stopping at the car wreck, the struck dog. The alternating merge, also known as the zipper. And I love that he's doing all these lovely things that are just so small, like even the moment in the parking lot where we're letting the next person go. This caretaking is our default mode, and it's always a lie that convinces us to act or believe otherwise. And I think that's very true. Creating is also communion, as well as community. Sometimes you find your people and you're so happy. This is a photo taken of me and some fellow authors, one of whom is in this room, in Prince Edward Island, where a lot of us had wanted to go for decades. We finally went there. We made dandelion crowns. We wore dresses or floral shirts in my case. I always forget to pack a dress. And we had the most magical time. And as Ross Gay said, Ann Patchett says, the secret is to keep adding voices, adding ideas, and moving things around as you put together your life. If you're lucky, putting together your life is a process that will last through every single day you're alive. And Susan Cain, another author I love, said, whatever pain you can't get rid of, make it your creative offering. And I think reading the work of Ross Gay has taught me whatever joy or beauty you cannot help feeling or seeing, make it your creative offering as well. What are you looking for when you're creating? And I think the answer to that is often found in this couplet, also from Emily Dickinson. I am out with lanterns looking for myself. I think that's why we make things, and the thing that we learn is that everybody else is also out there with their lantern looking for themselves as well. And it's kind of a beautiful place when you find each other. And so Bradbury says, so while our art cannot, as we wish it could, save us from wars, privation, envy, greed, old age, or death, it can revitalize us amidst it all. So the question I would ask you, you were born to make something, what is it? And you will answer that question all your life. Thank you.